Hello and welcome to WestMusings, 10-minute museum talks presented by the Western Museums Association here at the Church History Museum in Salt Lake City. We have 4 presenters this evening who are 4 people that I'm personally very passionate about. Each of them will be introduced in turn. Our first is a young woman named Colleen Dilenschneider. I've been following Colleen's work for several years. She's an extraordinary woman who's doing tremendous work in the field. How many people know Your Own Bone? Tremendous resource. Go check it out. It's the way that she created her own personal brand. Having done that so successfully, she's been tapped by the Impacts Corporation to help even more people as an independent museum professional traveling back and forth between Chicago, London, and now Salt Lake City. With that, we are incredibly grateful and honored to have Colleen join us on the stage this evening.
Excited to be here with everyone for the first ever WestMusing. I'm very thrilled. And on that note, let's start things off on the right foot. Let's get things a little steamy in here. I want to talk about touch. And no, I'm not talking about touching exhibits. We talk about that all the time. Touch the exhibits, don't touch the exhibits. What I'm talking about is the critical and increasing importance of individual members of museums touching visitors at museums. And that sounds a little salacious, but I'll explain. I want to talk about 2 kinds of touch, and that's how I'm going to frame this. The first kind of touch that I'm going to talk about is what I'm going to call physical touch. And by physical touch, I really just mean good old-fashioned face-to-face communication, or real communication, as we sometimes call it, as opposed to the second kind of touch I'm going to talk about, which is not real communication to some people, which is digital touch. And what I mean by digital touch is museums reaching out to people on their social media platforms, on real-time digital online websites, and creating one-to-one conversations outside of the museum sphere, outside of the museum site, and in this kind of digital realm. And the reason I want to talk about the relationship between these 2 kinds of touch is because we're a little bit confused about how they interact with one another. Specifically, we're not really sure, does digital touch, is it creeping on physical touch? Is it changing what we're doing inside of our galleries? What does this mean for us? My hope is at the end of the next 10 minutes, maybe 9 minutes now, you guys will have a concept of how to think about the relationship between digital touch and physical touch. And I want to show you that not only do they work together and are they partners, but they're actually incredibly critical for maintaining our bottom lines of getting people in the door. So what I'm going to do, the way I'm going to do this is I am going to walk through a visitor coming to our museum, and I'm going to show you guys how these things interact. And before I begin, I just want to do a little private quick shout out to anybody here who's ever been on an online dating site. And I'm not going to make anyone raise their hands, but if you have ever been on an online dating site, then you know personally how important it is to get these 2 things to connect to get what you want. All right, so we're talking about touch. We want sparks of informal learning to fly. So we have to be safe for all adults here. We have to acknowledge HPV. And that, in my world, is a high-propensity visitor. A high-propensity visitor is a person who demonstrates the demographic, psychographic, and behavioral characteristics that indicate a likelihood to visit a museum. So this is where our bread is buttered. These are the people who come to our museum. So these are the people that we're going to trace. And we're going to start with digital touch. And if we're going to try to get these people to come to our museum, well, we have to know what motivates the visitation decision. And I work for a predictive technology and market research company, so I happen to have quite a bit of data, and I've got some data on that. It turns out that high propensity visitors are are influenced very strongly by reputation, as you can see highlighted in the yellow. In fact, reputation is the second biggest driver for HPVs after schedule, in case you're all wondering what schedule is. That basically means being open on the days and the times that people actually want to come to your museum. So this is and if you can see the index value from where you're sitting, it's a very high index value. So we know that this is incredibly important to reputation. Or reputation is incredibly important to visitation. Well, then it brings up another question. Well, what goes into reputation? I'm glad you guys asked in your heads, because I can tell you. Two things go into reputation according to the model of diffusion. The first one is, I'm going to get mathy, so stick with me here. The first one is called the coefficient of innovation. That's our p-value. That's paid media. That's things that you pay to say about yourself. That's your television, that's your radio, that's your billboards, your skywriting, those kind of things. If you're on an online dating site, that's your profile. The other thing that goes into reputation is this Q value. That's the coefficient of imitation. And the coefficient of imitation is what we call reviews from trusted sources. So that's word of mouth. That's peer reviews like Yelp and TripAdvisor. That is social media, which is kind of what we're talking about. So our digital touch lives in this Q world. And one thing to talk about that's pretty important about Q is that our HPVs profile as being what we call super connected. What we mean by that is that HPVs are connected to web via mobile, home, or work. And a majority of HPVs are connected via 2 or more of those methods to the web. So we are dealing with a very connected bunch. So Q is really important. But moreover, and this is kind of cool, the data suggests that the coefficient of imitation, or things that people say about you, is 12.85 times more important in driving your reputation than things that you're paying to say about yourself. And this makes sense, right? If we go back to this online dating model, right? If you're checking out online dating sites, you see this guy, he looks really, really nice. He looks really dreamy, super cute, dark hair, beautiful. And you look at him, he says he's very gentle. So you have your P. But then you could do a Google search, and you see a review from a trusted resource of the police blotter. And things are a little different suddenly. Who are you going to trust there? So there we can kind of see this at play, but the data supports it as well. So here we can see that digital touch plays an important role in motivating visitation. So that's the first kind of half of where we are. And you guys are all saying, OK, wait, she promised us some sort of like steamy touch situation. I'm still talking about data, so don't get your hopes up too much. But if digital touch is where things get motivating, then on-site with physical touch is where things get satisfying. Allow me to explain. Let's move on. We've got our HPV to our museum. And then what happens once we get them there? Well, we actually have found, by looking at a vast majority of the data that we've collected with impacts, we have found that if we collect a lot of visitor satisfaction data about all sorts of different metrics. And we found out that if people have had one certain experience at a museum, their measurements are totally different. And I'll explain. We find that people who have had a PFE, that's a personal facilitated experience, have a very different perception of museums and satisfaction levels than people who don't have a PFE. And a PFE, that's not a group-guided tour, that's not a big docent-led tour, that's not a show. Those things certainly have value. But what we're talking about right now are one-to-one or one-to-few interactions. That's one-to-one or one to a small family or one to a couple. So the data that I'm about to show you is from one specific organization that we work with. And what I want to point out in the data that I'm about to show you is the increases that you're going to see. When we're looking at this kind of data, if we see a bump of even 2 points, it means something significant is going on. So with that in mind, I will show you this. You can see the experiences of somebody who's had a PFE and the experience of someone who has not had a PFE on admission value. People who had one person say hello to them, do wayfinding, have an on-site cart experience with them, had significantly believed that they got a better bang for their buck by paying to come to your museum and support you. And perhaps unsurprisingly, we also see other increases in other areas. That one is educational experience. Yes, we see an increase in educational experience. We also see it in entertainment experience. We see it, this is probably not surprising, we see it in employee courtesy. And keep in mind, these people are having very similar experiences with the exception of a PFE. In fact, PFEs are so strong at increasing satisfaction that we can use them to increase satisfaction by day part. So that means if you have construction, if you have a time that's going on that everything's pretty busy and you're noticing that you're getting lower TripAdvisor reviews, you can do what we call flood the zone. And that is go ahead and put some PFEs out on the floor and you will have an increased visitor experience. And we know that these people they're a lot more satisfied now. And satisfied people who are connected, like our HPVs are more likely to go back and they're going to leave positive TripAdvisor reviews. They're going to tell their friends, and this whole process cycles back. Things go back to digital touch. You have your digital touch, it increases your reputation, people come to visit you, you have your physical touch, it increases satisfaction, and we have this wonderful relationship between digital touch and physical touch where they actually work together. So, my takeaway for you is next time you're in a meeting and you're feeling a little frustrated, you think, oh, what's with kids these days? They just have their nose in their iPads. What's this doing for us? I hope that you'll think about this and the important relationship that they both have to our financial bottom line. But I also hope that you'll consider that perhaps a good museum, or I guess I should say an effective museum, is a lot like a successful online dating site. It manages to take two strangers, weave them together, get them to know each other, come out with some revenue, and create something like love. Thank you so much.